Some betrayals don't exactly shout from the rooftops. They just sort of seep in, silent, sneaky, like a poison that takes its sweet time. One day you're the go-to person, the next, it feels like you're a ghost. Your work mysteriously not yours anymore, your value questioned, and your voice, well, it's just gone. So, what happens when the silence you're backed into ends up being the loudest thing in the whole company? For 15 years, I wasn't just clocking in and out at Viridian Dynamics. I was helping build the place. My name's Alex, and I poured everything I had into that company. Late nights? Standard. Weekends? Often gone, and not for the overtime, because that was a rare beast. No, it was for the satisfaction of creating something, of seeing an idea go from a fragile thought to something real and solid. I'd mentored the new folks, designed processes that saved us a ton of money, millions actually, and I was a key player in developing our main software, Innovate. That thing became the heart of our operations. My reviews were always glowing, full of words like indispensable, visionary, and dedicated. I really believed in Viridian. And I genuinely thought Viridian believed in me too. The office felt like a second home, and my colleagues? They were like a second family. We'd celebrate wins together, ride out the tough market waves, and be there for each other through life's curveballs. There was a real rhythm to our work, a feeling that we were all in it together. I wasn't just some nameless employee. I was a recognized part of what made things tick. Even the CEO, Mr. Harrison, a guy I had a massive amount of respect for, had personally complimented my work more than once. He wasn't around the day-to-day grind much, but when he acknowledged your work, it meant something. He knew who was getting results, or at least, that's what I thought. My world felt pretty stable, my contributions were seen, and my future at Viridian looked secure. I wasn't a complete innocent. I knew office politics were a thing, but I guess I foolishly believed that if you just worked hard and got results, you'd always be recognized, always valued. I had my systems, a good reputation, and I was proud of what I did. The pay was good too, reflecting my experience and the impact I was making. I felt secure. Then came the news. A new department head, a change agent, they called him, brought in to shake things up. His name was Marcus Thorne. He rolled in with this layer of slick corporate charm, a vocabulary stuffed with the latest buzzwords, and this unnerving smile that never quite made it to his eyes. He talked a lot about synergy and disruption, but seemed to have very little clue about the actual work that kept the company afloat. That announcement sent a bit of a shockwave through the department. We were running like a well-oiled machine. What exactly needed such a big shakeup? Still, we were professionals. We shook his hand, offered our support, and got ready to fit this new leadership into how we worked. Like a lot of my experienced colleagues, I went in with an open mind, ready to share what I knew, my projects, everything I had in the pipeline. I even set up a meeting to walk him through the upcoming major upgrade for the Innovate system, a project I'd been leading for almost a year, something that was going to massively boost our efficiency. So, in that first meeting, Marcus listened. Or, he looked like he was listening. He nodded, scribbled a few notes, and asked some pretty surface-level questions. I remember feeling this little knot of unease, like he wasn't really getting how complex it all was, but I brushed it off. He's new, I thought, still getting his bearings. I laid out the whole roadmap, the challenges we'd already beaten, the clever solutions I'd personally designed and put in place. I made sure to highlight the team members who'd been absolutely critical. I shared the projected impact, a 30% jump in efficiency, big cuts in overheads. This was my big project for the year, my baby. A week later, there's a departmental all-hands meeting. Marcus is up at the podium, just beaming. He announces the Innovate upgrade, painting this huge grand picture. He talked about his strategy, his brilliant approach, his team's amazing efforts. My name? The names of the core team who'd poured their guts into this. Not a whisper. He presented my slides, just with his name slapped on the bottom, as his own. The room went dead quiet, but I could feel everyone's eyes on me, a mix of shock and pity. It was so blatant, just stealing all that work, all that intellectual property, right out in the open. It felt like a punch to the gut, just this cold, hard disbelief. My work, my ideas, my leadership, all snatched by a guy who, a week before, probably couldn't even spell innovate. The bitterness hit me instantly, sharp and metallic, like the taste of betrayal. This wasn't just about not getting credit. It was like he was trying to erase me, my whole identity, in the company I'd given so much to. But oh, the humiliation didn't stop there. A few days later, I get called into Marcus's office. He's got that same creepy smile plastered on his face. "Alex," he starts, his voice dripping with condescension, "we're doing some restructuring to, optimize our budget. As part of that, we're reassessing all salary bands." He slides a letter across the desk. My stomach just dropped. "Effective immediately. Your salary will be adjusted." Adjusted. What a cold, sterile word for what it really was. A 20% pay cut. "Adjusted?" I finally managed to choke out. "Marcus, I've been with this company for 15 years. My performance has always been rated as exceeding expectations. I just led the development of the Innovate upgrade." He cut me right off, that smile of his tightening. "And we appreciate your historical contributions, Alex, but we need to align with current market rates and, frankly, your previous pay was pretty generous. We're looking for leaner, more agile team dynamics now." He basically called me overpaid. A dinosaur. The insult just hit me from all sides. Not only was my work stolen, but now, my actual value was being systematically torn down. The guy who just paraded my achievements as his own was telling me I was worth less. The injustice of it was just suffocating. I felt invisible, worthless, and totally powerless. All those years of loyalty, of always going the extra mile, felt like they'd been tossed in the trash, dismissed with a casual wave. The message couldn't have been clearer. I was dispensable. I walked out of his office in a complete daze. The shock started to turn into this cold, gnawing anger, but underneath all that was this deep, profound sense of disillusionment. This wasn't just a new boss with a new style. This was a deliberate takedown of my professional standing, and the company I'd poured my heart into was just letting it happen. My colleagues offered quiet words of support, their faces full of concern, but really, what could they do? He was the new guy in charge. That night, sleep was a joke. Those words, historical contributions, just kept echoing in my head. Was that all my 15 years boiled down to? History? This guy hadn't just stolen my credit and slashed my pay. He was trying to steal my future at the company. The emotional hit was instant. Stress, anxiety, this deep, gut-wrenching feeling of being totally wronged. The workplace, which used to be a source of pride and accomplishment, now felt like enemy territory. The weeks that rolled by after that were a masterclass in quiet suffering. I thought about fighting back, lodging a formal complaint, going to HR, but Marcus was the new golden boy, apparently favored by the higher-ups who saw him as some kind of dynamic, cost-cutting leader. What would my word, the word of a suddenly overpaid and probably disgruntled employee, really mean against his perfectly polished image? I'd seen how he operated. He was slick, manipulative, and always had an answer for everything. I had a strong feeling any confrontation would just get twisted to make me look like the problem. So I chose a different route. Silence. Not a meek, give-up kind of silence, but an observant one. A tactical retreat, you could say. I kept doing my job, the parts of it that were still given to me, with the same care I always had. But deep down, something fundamental inside me had just snapped. That fire, that proactive drive, that willingness to jump in and solve problems, it was gone. My world had kind of shattered, and the pieces just didn't seem to fit back together the same way. My participation in meetings nosedived. I used to be the one offering solutions, challenging ideas, pushing discussions forward. Now I just sat there, quiet, listening, observing. I stopped volunteering for new projects. I no longer sent out those detailed progress reports that often flagged potential disasters before they became critical. The extra hours vanished. I did what was required, exactly what was in my now shrunken job description, and not a single thing more. My usual contributions, the kind that often went unnoticed but kept things humming smoothly, they just stopped. And slowly, the absence of my input started to create this subtle void. Projects I would have instinctively steered back on course began to drift. Complex problems that I would have quietly untangled behind the scenes started to blow up, landing right on Marcus's desk, problems he usually seemed completely unprepared to handle. He'd call meetings, talk in circles, and hand out tasks without really understanding what was going on. Those leaner, more agile team dynamics he kept yapping about started to look a lot more like chaotic scrambling. I remember one time so clearly, a critical system integration, a follow-up to the Innovate upgrade, started showing some serious bugs. In the old days, I'd have been all over that, working with the tech team, finding the root cause, deploying a fix, often before senior management even knew there was a major issue. This time, I saw the early warning signs in the data, made a note of them for myself, but kept my mouth shut in the team meetings. Marcus was in charge now, It was his project to manage. The bugs snowballed, leading to a partial system outage. Client complaints started as a trickle, then became a flood. Marcus was visibly flustered in emergency meetings, his fancy buzzwords completely useless against failing code. He'd look around the room, almost pleadingly, for someone, anyone, to pull a magic solution out of a hat. My silence, in those moments, felt heavy, almost like you could touch it. It wasn't out of spite, not really, but more from this profound sense of detachment. He'd made it crystal clear my expertise wasn't worth what it used to be. Now he was getting a taste of what its absence felt like. The stress and anxiety that had taken hold after that initial betrayal just got deeper. It was exhausting trying to keep up a professional front while feeling so utterly devalued and furious inside. Sleep became a luxury. I felt isolated, even though my colleagues knew, on some level, what was going on. They were sympathetic, sure, but also careful. Marcus's leadership was unpredictable. A culture of fear started to creep in, a reluctance to speak out. You could see morale across the department just plummeting. If this could happen to me, a 15-year veteran, what did that mean for them? My silence wasn't just about not speaking up in meetings. It was a withdrawal of all that invisible support I'd provided for years. The quiet mentoring of junior staff, the preemptive troubleshooting, the institutional knowledge I'd always shared freely, all of it just receded. I was still there physically, but the core of my contribution, the part of me that had genuinely been indispensable, was on indefinite leave. I was waiting, watching. Surely someone, somewhere higher up, had to notice that the department's rhythm was off, that the usual stability was getting shaky. The big question was, would they notice before things completely imploded? Or was I really as invisible as Marcus Thorne wanted me to be? The irony wasn't lost on me. My silence was a direct result of being silenced, of having my work stolen and my worth trashed. Yet, that very silence was now starting to make a lot of noise, creating ripples that even Marcus, in his little bubble of self-proclaimed brilliance, couldn't totally ignore, though he definitely tried to blame it on everything but his own terrible management. He started to micromanage. His demands became more erratic, his temper shorter. The atmosphere got more toxic with each passing day. I documented everything, every stolen credit, every dismissive comment, every project that stumbled because of his incompetence. My silence was patient, but it was also building a very strong case. The Innovate upgrade, Marcus's supposed shining moment, was the first big thing to suffer, thanks to his ignorance and my withdrawal. Now, the core system I'd built was solid, but any complex software needs constant tweaking, optimizing, and user support, especially right after launch. Marcus, having grabbed all the credit, was now the guy everyone went to for high-level issues. Problem was, he lacked that deep, gut-level understanding of how it all worked. So when a key client, one that brought in nearly 15% of our quarterly revenue, reported this persistent glitch that was messing up their workflow, Marcus promised them a quick fix. He then handed it off to a junior team, giving them some garbled version of what he thought the problem was. They, not surprisingly, struggled. Days dragged into a week. The client got more and more ticked off. Before all this, I would have personally jumped on an escalation like that. I knew the client, knew their specific Innovate setup, and probably could have figured out and fixed the issue in a few hours. Now, I just watch the email chains get longer, the meetings become more frequent and achieve less, and Marcus's explanations to the client get more and more tangled. He never once asked me for help. His pride, or maybe his fear of showing how out of his depth he was, just wouldn't let him. The department's performance numbers, once consistently strong, started to slide. Deadlines were being missed. Small mistakes, the kind I used to catch and fix almost without thinking, began to slip through. They were minor embarrassments at first, but they added up, painting a bigger picture of sloppiness. In department meetings, Marcus would blame legacy issues, or resistance to change, or even a lack of proactivity from the team. It never once crossed his mind that the common link in all these new problems was his own leadership or the gaping hole left by my previous integral role. My colleagues, especially the more experienced ones, started giving each other these knowing looks. Some would quietly come to me, asking for advice on problems they were stuck on, problems Marcus couldn't solve. I'd help, discreetly, but I wouldn't step in officially. I couldn't. If I did, it would just be letting my work get swallowed up again without any acknowledgement. Or worse, I'd be cleaning up Marcus's messes without the pay or respect that should come with it. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the principle of actually recognizing and valuing expertise. You could practically taste the erosion of trust in the air. Team members got hesitant to take initiative, scared their ideas would be stolen by Marcus, or they'd get the blame if things went sideways. That collaborative spirit, the one that used to define our department, was replaced by this cautious, almost fearful, way of just doing what they were told. Productivity suffered, not because people weren't working, but because they were working without clear, competent direction, and without the safety net of experienced oversight that I had, perhaps too quietly, always provided. It was during a particularly disastrous quarterly review meeting that the first real crack appeared in Marcus's armor, a crack I sensed might finally get some attention from higher up. Our department's numbers were way down, significantly. Marcus, flustered under some sharp questioning from the finance director, fell back on vague corporate speak and outright blaming others. He claimed the Innovate upgrade, while conceptually brilliant, his words, for my work, remember, had unexpected integration challenges that were hitting overall output. He even subtly tried to suggest that maybe the initial build wasn't as solid as he'd first been led to believe. I sat there, silent, through his entire presentation, keeping my expression carefully neutral, but inside, a storm was raging. He was now actively trying to trash the quality of my work to cover his own backside. That was a new low, even for him. The finance director, a sharp woman named Sarah Evans, didn't look at all convinced by Marcus's excuses. Her gaze lingered on him for a moment, then swept across the room, and I swear it paused for just a fraction of a second too long on me. It was a tiny moment, but it lit a small spark of hope. Maybe my silence, combined with the department's nosedive, was finally becoming too loud to ignore. Perhaps the CEO, Mr. Harrison, who valued results above everything, would soon start asking some tougher questions. The silence had to break eventually. The only question was when and how big the explosion would be. The turning point didn't arrive with a bang. It was more like a slow, dawning awareness in the upper offices of Viridian Dynamics. Mr. Harrison, the CEO, he was a numbers guy, driven by results, by the quiet hum of a company running smoothly, and the machine, at least in my department, was audibly sputtering. The missed deadlines, the client complaints, those sinking metrics, these weren't just blips on a radar, they were symptoms of something much deeper going wrong. Whispers started going around that Mr. Harrison was taking a much closer look at how departments were performing, especially Marcus's. The Innovate system, which had launched with so much fanfare, though with the wrong guy taking the credit, was now a growing headache. Those persistent client issues, especially with that major account I mentioned, had gotten worse. The client, completely fed up with Marcus's fumbling and empty promises, had actually hinted at reviewing their contract. That was a multi-million-dollar alarm bell that not even Marcus could just ignore. Then, one afternoon, an email popped into my inbox. It was from Helen, Mr. Harrison's longtime executive assistant. Mr. Harrison would like to schedule a brief informal chat with you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. in his office. Please come prepared to discuss the Innovate system and recent departmental performance. My heart started hammering. A brief, informal chat with the CEO about the very things Marcus had botched and I'd stayed silent on? This was it, the moment I'd both dreaded and, on some level, really hoped for. The next morning, I walked into Mr. Harrison's office, a place I hadn't set foot in for over a year. He was an imposing man, no doubt, but his style was usually fair and to the point. He motioned for me to sit. No one else was there. "Alex," he started, his voice calm but with this serious edge. "We haven't spoken directly in a while. I've been concerned about the Innovate system's ongoing issues, concerned about the general output from your department." Marcus Thorne painted a very positive picture when he took over, particularly about the Innovate upgrade. He took full credit for its development, as I recall. He paused, his eyes locked on me. Yet, the primary architect of that system, according to all the prior documents and my own memory, was you. My silence in that moment felt like a crossroads. I could play it safe, be diplomatic, or I could just lay out the truth. I went with the truth. "Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "Marcus Thorne took credit for a project that my team and I spent nearly a year developing. Shortly after he presented my work as his own, he told me that my 15 years of service and consistent high performance warranted a 20% pay cut. He said my salary was too generous and that he was looking for leaner dynamics." Mr. Harrison's expression didn't really change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. A pay cut? After delivering the Innovate upgrade? I was not made aware of this particular personnel change in that light. "No, sir, I imagine you weren't," I replied. Since that happened, I fulfilled the duties that were assigned to me under my revised role and pay. I haven't been consulted on the strategic direction of the Innovate system or on any other major projects, despite my long history and deep understanding of our core technologies. So your silence, he said, choosing the word very deliberately, your noticeable withdrawal from project leadership and proactive engagement, which several senior managers have mentioned offhand, has been a direct response to these actions? My silence, Mr. Harrison, I stated, has been the result of being shown, very clearly, that my contributions were no longer valued at their previous level, and that my expertise was something to be taken, not collaborated with. When my work was stolen and my salary cut, it sent a very clear message. I listened to that message. He leaned back in his chair, just taking it all in. The issues we're seeing, the client dissatisfaction, the missed targets, you believe these are linked to Thorne's management and your subsequent disengagement from your previous level of contribution. I believe, I said carefully, that when you remove a key, experienced architect from the heart of complex operations, or devalue them to the point where they disengage, then inefficiencies and problems are a pretty predictable outcome. Systems and projects don't just need to be created, they need ongoing, expert care. I didn't need to spell it out any further. The results, or lack of them, pretty much spoke for themselves. Mr. Harrison was quiet for a long moment. His gaze seemed distant, like he was replaying months of reports and meetings in his head, but now seeing them through a completely new filter. The silence in his office was different from mine. It was the sound of gears turning, of a sharp mind reevaluating everything. Alex, he finally said, his voice firm, I pride myself on building a company that values talent and integrity. What you're describing, if it's accurate, is a serious failure of management and a betrayal of our company's core principles. He paused. I need to verify certain aspects of this, but I'll tell you right now, your record at Veridian, your historical performance, it speaks for itself. It always has. Over the next few days, a quiet but intense investigation started. Mr. Harrison and HR discreetly interviewed other senior members of my department, people I'd worked alongside for years, people who had seen Marcus's behavior and my subsequent withdrawal firsthand. They went through project documentation, email chains, and performance numbers from before and after Marcus arrived. The picture that emerged was undeniable. My story was confirmed. Marcus Thorne's version of events started to fall apart. The actual confrontation with Marcus, when it happened, wasn't something I saw, but the fallout was quick and decisive. Marcus was called into a meeting with Mr. Harrison and the head of HR. From what I picked up through the office grapevine, he initially tried to bluster his way through it, to deflect, to blame anyone but himself, but the evidence was just too strong. His claims of leading the Innovate project were easily shot down by version histories and my detailed archived development logs. His excuse for my pay cut, especially when you put it next to my documented history of success and the fact he'd just stolen my work, looked petty and downright malicious. Within a week, Marcus Thorne was gone. No big public announcement, no farewell cake, just an empty office and a brief internal memo saying he had moved on to other opportunities. The silence around his departure was just as telling as all the noise he'd made when he arrived. Mr. Harrison called me back to his office. Alex, he said, and his tone was one of genuine apology. The company owes you an apology. What happened was unacceptable. Your credit was stolen, your salary was unjustly cut, and your loyalty was met with profound disrespect. I personally regret that this was allowed to happen on my watch. Then he laid out his plan. My salary was immediately put back to its original level, with back pay for the time it was cut. He offered me a formal promotion to Director of Systems Architecture, a role that actually recognized my true contributions and expertise, along with a significant raise, even beyond my original salary. We need your expertise, Alex, he said. We need your leadership. More importantly, we need to restore your faith in Veridian. It wasn't an easy yes. The betrayal had cut deep, and those emotional scars weren't going to disappear overnight. Trust, once it's shattered like that, is incredibly hard to rebuild. I thought about all the stress, the anxiety, that awful feeling of being invisible, but I also thought about my 15 years of work, the systems I'd built, the colleagues who really were like family, and I saw in Mr. Harrison a genuine commitment to make things right. I accepted, but I had conditions. I wanted guarantees of more transparency in performance reviews and who gets credit for projects. I wanted a real commitment to building a culture where this kind of predatory behavior couldn't just take root again. Mr. Harrison agreed to all of it. The atmosphere in the department started to change almost immediately. It was like a collective sigh of relief. My colleagues, the ones who'd stood by silently but sympathetically, were visibly thrilled. The projects that had been going off the rails started to get back on track as I slowly, cautiously re-engaged. But this time, with the recognition and authority I actually deserved. The whole journey had been painful, a really harsh lesson in workplace injustice. But my silence, the silence born from that injustice, had ultimately triggered the very intervention that led to things getting fixed. It wasn't the loud protest I'd initially thought about, but a quiet, strategic withdrawal whose impact became impossible to deny. The CEO had indeed noticed my silence, and in doing so, he'd given me back my voice, my value, and my place. The whole thing taught me that while loyalty is a good thing, your self-worth is crucial, and sometimes, the most powerful statement you can make is by carefully withholding your usual strength, forcing others to finally see the value you brought all along. Has anything like this ever happened to you? Or maybe to someone you know? It's such a tough spot to be in, and figuring out how to handle it can be incredibly tricky. I'd love to hear your experiences or thoughts in the comments below. What do you think you would have done if you were in my shoes? And hey, if you're finding this story compelling, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about workplace drama and personal resilience. Your support really helps bring these kinds of stories to light. Getting to this resolution was far from a walk in the park. That initial shock of Marcus's actions, the profound sense of betrayal, and the daily grind of feeling undervalued, it all took a significant toll. There were definitely days when I questioned my decision to stay silent, wondering if I should have fought back harder, more vocally. But looking back, the quiet documentation, just sticking to my redefined duties, and the eventual, undeniable impact of my withdrawn expertise, it all built a case that was simply impossible to ignore. This whole experience really hammered home a harsh truth. Workplace injustice can happen to anyone, no matter how long you've been there or what you've achieved in the past. It highlighted the devastating emotional and psychological hit you take from being devalued, how it can chip away at your self-esteem, ramp up anxiety, and lead to burnout. But, on the flip side, it also shone a light on how important resilience is, it holding on to your integrity even when things are deeply unfair, and the eventual power of truth when there are systems in place for it to actually be heard. Mr. Harrison's intervention was absolutely crucial, a real testament to leadership that, when faced with compelling evidence, is willing to admit mistakes and get back to its core values.
However, the silence itself, my silence, became the catalyst. It wasn't a passive surrender. It was a strategic stance that forced a recognition of worth. The void left by my usual contributions became a blaring alarm that even the highest levels of the company couldn't ignore anymore. For anyone out there facing something similar, please know that the emotional roller coaster you're on is valid. Those feelings of betrayal, of being devalued, the stress, they're all real and significant.
While every situation is unique, finding ways to document your contributions, maintain your professionalism as much as you can, and really understand your own worth are so critical. Sometimes, the quietest actions or inactions really can speak louder than words, leading to an unexpected and, hopefully, just resolution. My world felt like it shattered for a while there, but in the end, the pieces were put back together, stronger and more clearly defined than before. The silence had definitely served its purpose.